Welcome back. So we've seen how to make a single request using an XHR, but that really isn't AJAX. Remember that AJAX is the confluence of making a request, however you do it, XHR in our case, plus manipulating the DOM in some way to make a seamless experience for your user. Basically, we're doing part of the equation, we're making the request, but we're not doing anything with the data. So we're gonna go through and make a very simple, silly app today. What it will do, I have it open here, and the starter code, it doesn't work just yet, but we have a button. We click this button and it will replace this image with a new random dog image. I'm sorry for any cat lovers. I couldn't find a cat API. Well, actually that's a lie. I didn't look for a cat API, but I don't think one exists. So we're using dogs. This is what the API looks like, by the way. So every time we request it, notice this URL, it changes. It gives us a random one. It might be hard to see that small, but it does change. So we're going to take this URL. Well, first, when we click this button, we want it to trigger a request. That request goes off, comes back. Then we take this URL and we update, I'll show you here, this image. What part do we update? We update the source. So it has a source already that I've given it, just a standard kind of starter image, but we'll be changing this as we go. So that's really the AJAX flow. Something happens to initiate a request. Then that request goes off, comes back, and then you do something with the data to manipulate the DOM to show that change. So in the case of Gmail, what is actually initiating those requests? Well, what actually happens, or what used to happen, is that it was on a timer. And every, let's say, 30 seconds or a minute, a request would be made to Google server to say, hey, does Colt have any new emails? If he does, give them to us. Then they come back, and then in our JavaScript, those new emails are appended to the page. The DOM is manipulated in the same way we're going to do here, but rather than an image that we're adding, they're adding whatever HTML markup an email needs. Or in the case of Pinterest, like we saw earlier, scrolling down to the bottom triggers the request. The request is made, data comes back, and then new pins are appended. So we're starting simple. We have a button here, and the first thing that we should do is just get code to run when we click the button. So that's simple. Let's start by selecting the button. I should point out our markup, very, very simple. I just have a container inside of that, an H1 that we're not manipulating, then an image tag that we will be updating, and a button that all we care about, it has an ID called BTN. We just want to be able to capture those clicks, trigger the request. Then the CSS is very simple. I actually use Flexbox, as you can see, to center things here horizontally, but really doesn't matter. So I'm going to hide that. Focus on our, no, I didn't just hide it, and I unhid it. And I'll make JavaScript a little bigger. Okay, so we're going to select the button. I'll call it BTN. And I'll use query selector, document.query selector. The ID is BTN, and save. Then we'll do a btn.add event listener click. Give it a function here, and let's just do an alert clicked, just to make sure everything's hooked up correctly. So when I click that button, we should get an alert that says clicked. And it works. Okay, so rather than just alerting us, we want to actually make the request. So we'll start with listen for clicks, make the request when the click happens. This is all of our fun XHR code. So we'll make a new request, var XHR equals XML, all caps, H caps, lowercase, TTP, request with capital R. Let's figure out the URL. So I have that here. dog.ceo/api/breeze/image/random. I'll also include that as a link. Come back, just paste it in to start. We're going to want to do our xhr.open. The first parameter is get a string. The second one is a string of the URL. Then we have our xhr.send. Okay, so we're getting there. Now we need to actually do something with the data. And that's where we have to do our onReadyState change fun code So xhr dot on ready state change equals function. And in here, we'll add in our if, basically check if it's done. So if xhr dot ready state, always confusing too, that state is capitalized here, but not here. But no, most events or all events are uncapitalized, so it does make sense, but it can be confusing. If it equals 4, and let's just do our status code as well, and xhr.status equals 200. Let's just do console.log xhr.response text. Okay, it's a mouthful there, but make our new request when a click happens. We send it to this URL as a GET request. Then we're checking any time that the ready state changes. Is it equal to 4, meaning that it's done? And is the status code 200, meaning that it worked successfully? Status okay. If that's true, both of those conditions, then just print out the response text. So we won't see anything here. We're just making the request. Let's see. Oh, I'm getting an error message saying that I need to add the new keyword, which is true. Where we're creating the request, I need to say new XML HTTP request. Okay, so now when I click the button and go to my console, you can see I get some data. Now this is different than the GitHub API. Remember that the GitHub API just sent me a thing of text. It wasn't structured as JSON or XML, but this is structured as JSON. So if I want to get, let me go to the, there we go, to the actual source of it. I just want the message. I don't care about status. I want the message in the corresponding URL so that I can get that image. To do that, you'd think I could just say dot message, because it looks like a JavaScript object. Dot message would get me that. But if I try it, click the button, I just get undefined every time. 3 times I clicked. So it's still going and getting the data, to be clear, but dot message doesn't exist. And that's because it's not a JavaScript object. This can be confusing. It's JSON, but it's still all a string. What I need to do is convert it to a JavaScript object from that string. So it actually looks like this. If I just copied it, if this is the data we're getting back, that looks like an object, but put it all in quotes like this, and that's what it looks like. And I can't do dot message on a string like I could on an object. So we need to turn it into JSON, and the way we do that is very simple. There's a method called json.parse, just like that. So I want to give it xhr.response text, tell it to parse that, and let's save the result as a variable. We'll call it var data equals json.parse xhr.response text, then we'll console.log data. So it should actually give us the exact same thing, but you'll notice a slight difference. Let me refresh, click the button, go back to my console, do a better click. There we go. Notice that this time, instead of just being text, it's an interactive object. That's how we know it's actually an object. It says that rather than just being a string. So now we can say dot message. Okay. Save one last time. Now I click and I'm just getting the URL. Perfect. So we've now dialed it in. We're making the request when it should happen, when the button is clicked. We're getting the data back, converting it to JSON. We're taking the dot message part, that's all we care about, and we're saving it to, well, we're not saving it to a variable just yet. So let's do that now. Var URL equals, there we go, dot message. So this will just have a URL variable, and all we want to do now is update the image tag so that its dot source src is equal to URL. So we need to select the image, and I'll do that up top. Var img equals document.query selector. Did I give it an ID? Yes, ID equals photo. Kind of a dumb name, but we'll go with it. So that selects the image, and then down here, once the request is done and status code is 200, once we have the URL of the random dog URL, dog photo URL, we just do image.src equals this new URL. Image being the image we selected. So let's see, it's a moment of truth. Let's make this a bit bigger. Start off with that. I click and it works. Nice cute dog. And there's another one. And there's, oh, I love that. Nice little husky. Maybe that looks like a Pomeranian husky. Who knows? So what's happening again, just to sum this all up, this is kind of the traditional AJAX workflow. Something triggers an event. That event then sends off a request somewhere. Then the data comes back. Once it's back, we parse the data, we get what we want, kind of prune it, all the excess away, and then we update the DOM in some way. And that same workflow is used all over the place in single page applications. So I want to show you that. I have Pinterest open, and I don't just want to show you what you see as a user, I want to show you what's happening underneath. So if we open the console here, I'm going to go to Network, and there's actually an XHR tab you may or may not have seen before. So as I scroll over here, watch what happens on the left or on the right. So I hit the bottom and it needs to load more data. It makes a new XHR request. Here comes another one. You can see each one of these is a request, and each one has status code 200. So every time I'm doing that, it's firing off an event that says, okay, go make a request, get more data. And you can actually dive more into what the data looks like over here, what's coming back. You can see how long it takes, how large the payload is. You can learn a lot about them. You can see the URL and all that stuff. So one more time, it's kind of fun to see these requests that we're creating. So it's working the exact same way. It's just much more complex data that's coming back rather than our little dog button, but it's the same idea. Triggering an event, request is sent, data comes back, page is updated. Cool. I get one more to leave. Oh, that's a perfect one to leave it off on. Hi, little chow chow. All right. Hopefully that was kind of fun.